Welcome to a special New Year's edition of Practically Political. I'm Dave Spencer.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to everyone. Well, I thought we would take today's special show and just go over some of our thoughts, reflections, wishes, regrets. 2022 was a momentous year. 2023 threatens to be even more so. So I thought it'd be fun just to go over and talk about the years, winners and losers and all that. But maybe I'll start with you, Carrie. What are just your general reflections on the year? And obviously, you're more of the MAGA Republican than I am, so things probably were a little more disappointing towards the end of the year. But what are your reflections? What do you see as, say, the GOP's successes in 2022?
Yeah, no, I mean, like every year has highs and every year has lows. I think for our country and for the world, a big low obviously was the invasion of Ukraine. And I know we've debated the setup and how Putin felt emboldened by actions that Biden took, in my opinion. But that obviously from a human rights standpoint, the tragedy and the loss of human life, that's a huge low. I do think that the bravery of the Ukrainian people, that was a big high, as far as, just being able to kick them out and recover their borders to a large extent. But I think domestically, for me, a big high was the Dobbs decision by the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade. From a human rights standpoint, I was so excited because I believe that we're going to see a lot of innocent lives that are going to be saved from this. And a culture of life, I think, was emboldened by that. And I think the conversation about the Joe Biden of old school Joe Biden, when he was younger in his Senate career, he said that an abortion is a tragedy. And Democrats used to say that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. And now Democrats have gone so far to the point where it is not safe, legal, and rare. It is very common and it is unsafe. And I just think the new frontier of allowing for a culture of life to grow, that was a big high for me. Obviously,
well,
to your question on
even Mark Thiessen of the Washington Post, who's a pretty reliable conservative writer, gives Joe Biden credit for the way that he handled Ukraine, the way that he's given Zelensky pretty much what he wants. A lot of the right-wing media, as you know, are going after Zelensky and are defending Putin, which I still don't quite understand. But that's perhaps a conversation for another day. But do you also at least share with in the sentiment of a lot of conservatives and give Biden credit for handling it well in terms of helping Ukraine?
Well, I think it was a bipartisan thing, that's for sure. And yeah, I think what upsets me, and I've said this over and over, is that it's like giving credit to, no, the support for the Ukrainian aid was bipartisan. You had a few Republicans, and because you're talking about a very few Republicans, and you're giving them a lot more power than is actually true and real.
No, I'm talking about Republicans now that are talking about cutting back aid and saying that maybe this wasn't such a wise idea. I'm talking about Tucker Carlson on TV going after Zelensky, and Donald Trump saying that Putin was brilliant to invade Ukraine. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about Republican, to put it mildly, hesitancy on support for Ukraine.
But I don't agree with everything Tucker Carlson says, especially on this issue. I think the question of accountability for the weapons and the money, that's legitimate. And then also the fact that you had 2 million illegal immigrants enter U.S. borders and you didn't hear a peep. And I think looking to 2023, I think we probably will see Homeland Security's Secretary impeached because he's been recklessly incompetent. And forget about Obama. I know you like to bring him up and Trump. I'm talking about now. I'm talking about 2022 and 2023. The Biden administration has been reckless on our own border. And I think that's a big dichotomy that a lot of conservatives see, that it seems like Joe Biden is a lot more concerned about Ukraine's border than he is about the United States border and the prioritization. That I think that is the ethos for a lot of people. I think for me, as far as Joe Biden is concerned, I've said this before. You saw how Putin watched what Joe Biden did in Afghanistan. He's even said it.
Joe and Biden what Trump did in Afghanistan when he negotiated a surrender and let 5,000 of the most heinous criminals out of jail. Is that what you're talking about?
Donald Trump could have left Afghanistan at any point over 4 years, and he did not. And he actually followed the advice of his military leaders, whereas Joe Biden did not. So that sort of recklessness and impulsiveness and weakness by the part of Biden incentivized a bully like Putin. And then the fact that the disastrous energy policy of Germany and Europe and the United States gave so much monetary power and leverage to Putin, that again is another hypocrisy. That when you line the pockets of a man like Putin, you're just enriching him and allowing him and emboldening him to do this because he knows he can squeeze
well,
you.
First of all, his pockets weren't lying. We were very successful and we froze hundreds of billions of dollars of assets of his. So he's a lot poorer than when this war started. Now, granted, he's still been selling oil to countries like China and India.
That's after the fact. That's after the fact.
That is true, but I think you're trying to conflate two separate issues. But I just want to go back to something else you said about the whole Dobbs decision. And I know that, and I'm someone who's pro-choice with limits because, again, I view it not as a religious thing. I view it as there's a certain point when a fetus becomes viable. And that I know we disagree on this, but my point is what Dobbs in this country, we have a history of expanding rights, not taking them away. And I think that a lot of pro-lifers, and I know you've gotten pretty rabid about this, or talk about all these babies being murdered and all this, I think it would really help your cause if you would acknowledge and say, you know what, I understand this was a right that you had for 50 years in your minds. In our minds, this is something that's always been wrong. So what we want to do is we want to help you. We're going to work with state legislatures because the states that have the stiffest anti-abortion laws are also typically the states that offer the worst infant nutrition programs and the worst child support programs for these what are essentially forced births. So I really think that a little acknowledgement from your side that, hey, I understand how this is a blow, but let's work together. And it's also unfair to say that the left is pro-abortion. This has been a media spin of this abortion till birth. The only difference is doctors should make the decision. Congress should legislate medicine, just like they shouldn't have passed the so-called partial abortion ban or partial birth abortion ban, which is a misnomer anyway. But the point is, it's the doctor that makes the decision. So sometimes an end of pregnancy abortion is an incredibly traumatic thing. I don't know anyone who's pro-abortion. That is a myth that's been invented on the right. So I just want to clarify those points.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. You said a phrase that really shocks me. Actually, you said these are forced births, and I just think when you look at however long our human species
when you ban abortion, you're forcing people to have babies.
The concept of forced birth is so anathema to human evolution is to
can you see how people feel that way? Carrie, I know what your view is. I know what your view is.
No, I'm just saying. It's, no. I'm just trying to put in perspective when you're talking about, you had a right that you didn't have before. In the long arc of human evolution, pro-abortion is tiny. There's only been so look at it from that vantage point of the human species is meant.
That's like telling people that crime was so much worse in New York City back in 1978 than it is right now. People don't care about the arc of time. They don't care about 100 years ago. They care about right now. And all they know is that what in their mind, what many of these women, a fundamental right that was taken away from them. So all I'm saying is I think it would help your cause if you would show a little empathy and say, hey, we personally disagree on this issue, but I can understand how you feel about this. And I'm not seeing that at all from your side. And I think, again, it's really hurting your case. And the voters, by the way, you paid for it at the election, at the polls. One of the main reasons that the midterms went so badly for Republicans is 3 times as many Republicans voted for Democrats as Democrats voted for Republicans. Obviously, independents went way for Democrats. And single unmarried women, off the charts for Democrats. That's largely due to Dobbs. So you could mitigate that by just trying to show a little empathy. I mean, can you see where I'm coming on that? You don't have to compromise your views.
Yeah, I do agree that the right needs to embrace the mother and the child, that the right shouldn't just be focused on the life of one person in this equation.
Remember Barney
there are
Frank's
2 lives here at
famous
stake.
comment?
And I think
For conservatives, life begins at conception and ends at birth. They care about babies until they're born, which I have to say there is good proof of that. If you look at the conservative states compared to blue states and the support that they give, infant nutrition, child support, you name it. Texas, particularly, which has one of the most draconian laws, has one of the most feeble support systems of any state.
Well, I think you're always looking at the government policies, but when you look at the actual people, conservative people and conservative organizations, pro-life organizations, and yes, a lot of them are churches. You want to make this a religious thing. I think it's just a human rights ethical thing. But when it comes to adoption, when it comes to prenatal care, diapers, all of the crisis pregnancy centers, there is a 5-to-1 ratio of crisis pregnancy centers to abortion centers in America. So I don't even think you understand this. And these are private, nonprofit, doesn't have anything to do with government. So you're talking, and a lot of them are secular, or they're not even religiously based. They're just nonprofits that tend to be staffed by conservative people. And you're not even aware of them. But people like Elizabeth Warren wants to shut them down because she wants to have the babies killed instead of to have these crisis pregnancy centers continue. I would encourage you, next time you're in DC, we can go visit
I don't know what you're talking
center.
about, but all I can say is that when you look at these
exactly,
states,
you don't know. I'm helping you fill the knowledge gap of crisis pregnancy centers, which are not government
so
run.
many more
in fact, a lot of
women
them turn
in
down
red
government
states
funding.
that don't have that support. These places that you talk about, they're not doing their jobs. I don't care how many of them there are, if you say, but the bottom line is women are most underserved for infant support programs in states that have the most draconian abortion laws. And that is a fact. And these centers that you talk about, well, maybe they exist, but they're not making up much of the gap. That's for sure.
Well, I think we could have a whole program about crisis pregnancy centers because they are, again, privately funded and they're funded largely by conservatives. And people who take the baby after the baby's born and adopt, they are far more likely to be conservative. So it's just not true when you say that conservatives are not pro-life after birth. It's just not. The facts don't bear that out.
Talk is cheap, but the money isn't there. So I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on that one. But the one thing I wanted to ask you is, one of my main points has always been that the Republican Party recently, particularly under Donald Trump in the last couple of years, doesn't really stand for anything. Remember, it was the first major party not to have a platform in 2020. And now you have this ridiculous speaker thing going on that hasn't happened for 100 years, where Kevin McCarthy is so weak that nobody likes him, but what was the old joke? He's not feared, respected, trusted, or liked. But other than that, he's great. And so I guess the question is, what's the end game here? Because maybe I'm missing something, and maybe I'm just not savvy enough to pick this up. But I'm no fan of Kevin McCarthy. We've talked about him on the show before. I don't need to get repeat what I've already said. You know how I feel about him. But who's it going to be? Jim Jordan? Andy Biggs? What's the end game here? What's the plan?
Some people said they wanted to bring in Donald Trump because technically you don't have to be a House member. But
that is true.
Byron Donalds is a congressman from Florida, and he's been nominated and he voted for himself, and he's got, I think, 20 votes or something. But it could turn out to be him. I've met him. I've interviewed him. He's fantastic. I actually like him a lot. That would be sort of the wild part.
But what's the end game?
Dave, I'm with you.
I'm asking that as an honest question because I love to parse these things, and I just can't figure it out.
Yeah, I think it's been very sloppy as far as what's happening with the speaker race. But I think the sentiment of why it's happening is there's just a lot of frustration by the base, the most conservative of the base, who I don't speak for, but just with people like Mitch McConnell, who are perceived as like the epitome of establishment. He voted for this omnibus bill that was just rammed through. And you have record inflation that is destroying 401ks. You had the average 401k lose $30,000 last year. That is significant for retirement. And if you're a senior living on fixed income, it's between inflation and the stock.
The market went up for a lot of years too, but I mean you're getting into specifics. I don't think the performance of the stock market is what drives these people. The market, the vicissitudes of the market are part of life, but I'm still, and maybe there's no answer. I'm just trying to figure out what's the end game here. What is the Republican Party trying to do? Because, as little as I think of Kevin McCarthy, just to see him be humiliated vote after vote in front of the world. And I'll tell you, whatever you think of Nancy Pelosi, and again, I'm not going to win any great awards for trenchant analysis on when I make this point, but you will appreciate how good she was at what she did the next 2 years, because she was a strong leader with the exact same margin that Kevin McCarthy has. And look what she got done. Again, you can agree or disagree with the policy, but look at what she got done. And this is what's now passing for governance. I don't know what to say. It's just embarrassing. It's the old cliche, the inmates have gotten control of the asylum, and we're all going to pay for it. There's no House of Representatives right now.
I agree with you as far as the nuts and bolts of Pelosi's effectiveness to do things that are harmful for the country. She was very effective.
You could say they're harmful. Some are good, some are bad, but she was effective at what she did.
Yeah. No, but she was effective. I agree with you there. She ruled with an iron fist. She had the discipline, and that's something that the right doesn't have right now. And I think, again, it goes back to
he had a month
not having
to do his homework. He had a month to do his homework, and he hasn't done anything. It's just, I am truly flummoxed at this is most pathetic display of attempted governance. I mean, the fact that this hasn't happened in 100 years is almost the least bad part of it all.
Well, a friend of mine just sent me a note from the Club for Growth about the rules that apparently Kevin McCarthy refused to agree to. And one of them, it said that his congressional leadership fund should be prohibited from spending money or providing grants to any super PAC to oppose conservative members or conservative candidates in Republican primaries. He wouldn't even agree to that. So I think that's a failure on his part. He also refused to allow one of their conservative members to be part of the House leadership. I mean, he couldn't figure out how to give and take. I think that's what Pelosi was the master at the concessions, and Kevin McCarthy's not the master of concessions. So I would definitely give Pelosi props for that, her ability to get what she wanted and to have that discipline for sure. I think I think though conservatives have been so upset by having an R next to your name has not translated into actually stopping anything meaningful in the Biden agenda. And in the Senate in particular, and that's what I think is frustrating, because you're talking about the House, not the Senate. So why would they continue to spin their wheels when it's ultimately not even, if they have the discipline in the House, it's still going to keep moving forward if you have somebody like Mitch McConnell who's not going to stick to conservative principles.
Well, and also, again, let's face it, as we talked about on the previous show, if you could have had Senator Doug Ducey and Senator Doug McCormick and Republican majority in the Senate if it weren't for Donald Trump and some of these clown candidates that he pushed through. So, good candidates matter. But gosh, as always, great conversation. But I guess I would love to wind down the show just by hoping or saying what is your wish for 2020, your greatest wish for 2023, and your greatest fear for 2023.
Yeah, well, why don't I start with the fear first and then on a positive note? Yeah, my greatest, well, I don't know. It's hard to say the greatest fear, but because it's like, okay, my greatest fear would be that COVID returns and China has like a nuclear or Armageddon or some sort of chemical warfare against us. I think China is the biggest geopolitical risk to the United States. So whatever risks they continue to promulgate in 2023, that's the biggest risk for me. That's my biggest fear. But it's more sort of an amorphous, it's a general national security and intelligence and even what's happening with TikTok, because TikTok is very much, I believe, and I've spoken to people in the intelligence community, including an NSA staffer who's looked at
it's the
the Chinese
CCP all the
government to
way.
use
We totally agree on that. I have never had it on my phone, and I never will.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what's your
I think the biggest
hope?
External. Yeah, I mean, my greatest hope is that I think that the country we can continue to recover from what happened with COVID and how polarized our country is. I think that would be my hope, that we can become less polarized as a country. And find, we debate a lot here about abortion. Where are the bipartisan areas where we can agree? I would say an area would be prevention. Let's talk about prevention instead of termination. How can we find ways where we can come together and it's a win-win, and then we can lower the temperature of the country and to start to see each other as our fellow countrymen and really appreciate each other more.
Yeah, no, I think that is a nice way. And by the way, I agree with you on China. I think, and I've said this many times before, I think I'm far more concerned about our having to manage China's decline than I am manage their rise. And if you look at everything that's going on now, I mean, the COVID crisis they're going to have there is going to make New York City in April 2020 look like a day at the beach. It's going to be really bad. Plus, they've got all kinds of demographic and environmental problems. But I think the greatest challenge will be, can we get back to decent governing? And what really worries me is that in the House, the crazies have taken over. You have when Marjorie Taylor Greene is the one in the room, is the adult in the room, we have a real problem. And I just don't see how anything is going to get done. I think it's going to be a clown show. And I think it's going to really hurt our ability to govern. On a positive note, and you know me, I am a glasses half full guy. I think that this year, because there was so much stuff and was going on, and you heard this acknowledged in some of the end of the year pieces in the newspapers, but the technological breakthroughs, both in terms of medicine and energy efficiency, battery technology, solar technology, there's a huge increase in both of those. And I think our ability to fight chronic diseases and our ability to move onto an alternative grid. Now, you know, I've always been someone who's been a pragmatist. I believe that we should go full speed ahead with domestic energy production and full speed ahead with alternatives. Seems like we've always had to choose. And I don't know why, because I think we should go to the wire on both of them. But the solar technology has improved so much that we're at the point, I think we're only a few years away from being able to power with solar electricity all these desalination plants around the world that will solve our water problem. So that's the one thing I don't worry about, is running out of water, because we've got plenty of it. We just need to find a way to very energy efficiently desalinate it. So that's my final message to our viewers, is that there's a lot to be optimistic. And I think also in 2020, 2022, democracy won, all the election deniers lost, and even the Sean Hannitys of the world, when they were complaining about the election in Nevada taking so long, they never said it was corrupt or fraudulent. They just said it was bad democracy that it took so long, which I agree. Florida can count their vote by the end of the day. Every state should be able to do that. But overall, I think we have a lot more to be grateful than we do to be worried about. And so on that very positive note, we will end our first show of 2023. And we just want to wish all of you the happiest of and most prosperous of years from all of us at Practically Political. I'm Dave Spencer.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield. Happy New Year. We'll catch you next time.